What we're about to see here is the first episode of season 2. We had enough success, obviously, in season 1 that HBO decided to renew our contract and bring us back again. The business model at HBO at that point didn't allow for them to say we're going to make 25 episodes of anything until we knew they were successful. So if you actually even look back at the beginning of things like Sopranos and Sex and the City, they started with 6, 8 episodes at the beginning, and then as they built an audience, they were given more and more shows to continue moving forward. Well, the same happened with us. We had an initial run of 6. The first season came out. They had done very well according to whatever it was that was their criteria at HBO, and we were able to come back for season 2. We did a pretty good ad campaign bringing it back to let people know that, and they had been rerunning a lot of the first 6 episodes, sort of building up to it. But we were now at the point where, unlike the first episode, or first season, that we were trying to do one long storyline. This is one that we essentially said, can we break these stories down a little bit tighter and make each one of them its own independent story with a little bit of the subplot playing in the background, but not being the driving part of the story. So a lot of those subplots, you're going to see bits and pieces of it here in the second season. And at the beginning of us coming back on the air, they did, as they do in a lot of shows, sort of an overview of what you may or may not have seen in the first season, just to refresh your memory here. At this point, HBO Animation, which had started off with, I think, 3 to 5 shows they wanted to get on the air. Some of those shows were not succeeding. And the stable of shows was slowly getting whittled down, so that by the end of it, HBO Animation literally consisted of Spawn, and that was all that was coming out of the HBO Animation. We were in the same building as the headquarters of HBO, 1 floor below the big executive. I warned them in advance, you do not want the crazy artist 1 floor below you, being able to get on the elevator with your big clients sitting there getting off 1 floor before you, but they insisted they wanted to be close to all of us, which made it sort of fun because if there was any sort of real problem, I was able to go upstairs and talk to the key people up at HBO. The leader of the show, who's still there 10 years later, Chris Albrecht, who's done a tremendous job at helping to accelerate the progress of HBO as a channel, was the one that had sort of the foresight into saying that we needed to bring some animation and some original programming into HBO. As you saw in the first season, we came up and over the boxes, and I was sitting there drawing at a drawing table because, again, they were trying to introduce the artist who had created Spawn, which was myself. The second go-around here, we sort of got a little bit creepier because, again, we had set the tone, and I didn't think going into the art part of it was going to be it. So we set up a small little room here with a bunch of cool things that you might see in some sort of bayou in New Orleans. And this one, I believe, was actually even directed by John Leakley. Or maybe that was the next scene, but John Leakley, one of the writers, it was John, there he is, there's his name. Was the writer with Rebecca Bradford, and John actually said, hey, let me direct the openings there. So all the openings in the first season were just one that we just reran over and over and over. What you're going to see in the second season, we actually did 6 different openings for the 6 different shows. John and Rebecca came on the show trying to do a follow-up on what Alan McElroy had done. He was the writer on the first series. He'd gone on to do some other work. Alan actually worked on the Spawn live-action movie. After his work on HBO, we were so happy with it. But we needed to sort of staff up for the second season, and not everybody was available. Now we come back, and we start introducing again, wanting to announce to the audience once more that you're not watching some fun-loving cartoon. So again, the creep factor and the mood setting, the darkness of it is all there. As I said before in my commentary in season 1, at the beginning of season 1, I wanted to have more of Spawn in black. And you just saw the shot there. Here's another shot of him. I just wanted the green eye sort of cut out. We didn't hit it with perfection, but if you're paying attention to it like I was, you're going to see that there's more of those mood shots. I was less concerned, again, about seeing the white marks on his mask. I was less concerned about seeing the marks on his chest. It's shots like that, to me, that sort of was the embodiment of what it was that I wanted this character to be. I didn't want him to be Superman. I wanted him to be more of a ghostly Batman character, if you will, that would sort of literally not only put fear in the hearts of the bad guys, much like Batman, but unlike Batman, who wouldn't cross the line and actually kill the bad guy, even a guy like the Joker, Spawn had no qualms as a warrior, as a guy who was literally somebody that worked for the undercover of the CIA and went on missions to literally assassinate people, had no qualms that if somebody pushed him back, if somebody shot at him, he would shoot them back. So the clown, who's been this guy that's sort of torturing him all over the place, every time he sort of comes, Spawn is now getting sort of less and less patience on this character, and his violence level continues to sort of get amped up, which is sort of a continuation on an emotional sort of tune of what we had done on the first season. The key stuff to me was really the dialogue that Spawn had with a character called Cagliostro, which was this old man, this wise old mage, if you will. And within the confines of that, Richard Dysart, who was the voice of Cagliostro, and Keith David, who was the tremendous voice of Spawn, who's everywhere I go, everybody keeps saying, if you ever do Spawn, you got to get Keith David. Well, we are now in the year 2007, and we are working on more Spawn animation that we hope that will be coming out later this year or next year. And Keith David is indeed the voice of that character. We've already done the recording of it. So Keith David, to me, equals Spawn into a lot of the fans, and we wanted to make sure that we kept sort of the key character coming back and having some continuity to it. But the conversations between Cagliostro, Richard Dysart voice, and Spawn were the ones where they would really sometimes in a room almost seem like they were going to come to blows with each other because they would both get very, very emotionally charged. And it was one of the things that I kept trying to push across to them when we were doing our recordings was I need you guys not to treat this show, all the actors, not to treat this show like a cartoon, but to treat it like a movie, like a TV show that, oh, by the way, happens to be animated. There was even a time where I wanted to actually bring people in to do the voice and not let them even know it was animated. Now, it becomes kind of odd because they always want to know what they're supposed to dress if you're going to be doing a live-action shoot. So we couldn't quite get there. But once I was able to get a lot of the actors to a point of saying, I need you to act. I need you to act. I don't want you to give me a voice. I want you to act. That I thought I got some of the best performances. It's one of the reasons why, if you actually look at the credits of who the voices are, the vast majority of them are people who you've seen in character roles in a lot of different movies. Keith David, Mike Nicolosi, Victor Love, James Keane, Michael McShane, who did Twitch and One of the Bums, John Rafferty Lee, and then Richard Dysart. Later on in season 3, we got even more with Jennifer Jason Leigh and Eric Roberts and a handful of other people, that we wanted people that weren't coming in with a preconceived notion of what animation cartoons are. I wanted actors doing this, and I wanted the emotion that they were going to give me with their voice. And once we sort of got there and everybody understood that, I believe that the believability and convincing the audience that these characters, though they're animated, actually had sort of a jeopardy to their life was actually going to be more real. Now, where we're at to some extent in the second season with the animation is that Spawn is just sitting there in the alleys and ultimately says, okay, I can't go back to my wife. I'm not going to be a human. I can't do much. So what I'm going to do is just sit in the dark alleys and do nothing. Now, Cagliostro and the clown keep saying to him, that's impossible. And the reason it's impossible is because people and forces are coming against you.
They look like this.
On top of that, some of them are coming because of your actions from the previous season. You can't sit there and say you want to be normal and be left alone and then go out there and whack some mafia hitman. Because once you kill a mafia hitman, that message will get back to that hitman's boss, and it will get up to people in power, and they will send more people and to take out and eradicate and eliminate whatever force it was, whatever person they thought it was. Obviously, we don't think of ghosts when we start talking about things like that. And go and get the guy who killed my boy. Who whacked my hitman? Go get him. And that was sort of the simple message. So now Spawn, who's trying to sit in the back alleys doing nothing, is just so far from that. And the message that we're going to get from Cagliostro is that if you want to act and you want to be a man, then you have to act like a man. And a man on some level doesn't just basically get angry and kill people because he can, because he has the power, and then think that there's no consequence to it. So Spawn, who's now sitting here, is going, oh my gosh, not only am I sitting in the alley with somebody going after me, but the guy that now is coming after me is a guy who actually killed me when I was alive. And it's a character called Chapel. And Chapel's the one that ultimately pulls the trigger on Al Simmons because they thought that Al Simmons was getting a little soft. And now Chapel, in a roundabout way, still working for the CIA, still working as part of sort of a patsy for the mob, is now put into a situation where they're going, somebody's taking out our guys in the New York alleys. You go find out what it is and take care of them, because everybody who tried in season 1 didn't come out alive to some extent.
I want to keep you safe, baby. The less you know about
I don't
what
understand
I do,
this
the
cloak
better.
and dagger stuff. You're a desperate.
Now we're going to have, again, some of the other parts that we have here, which are sort of the human elements away from Spawn in the stories. And these are the ones of Spawn's wife, ex-wife, depending on your perspective, of, you know, her getting remarried to Al, who is Spawn's best friend. And she is now going to be sort of caught up into it. Terry, which is the husband, the new husband, also works at the CIA. So not only is there sort of an emotional tie with all of them, but there's also sort of a business protocol that's going to tie them all up. Here we have a moment of Wanda, although she lost her husband, still, I think, like most of us who've lost a loved one, from time to time, need to remind themselves that they're not going to completely let go of that memory. And so although she does have a new husband that I'm sure she dearly loves, she still knows that she had a good man in Al and that he's never coming back. And she's just going to have to sort of live with, you know, sort of the hardships of life that each one of us do. There's the ring that we saw again in the first episode throughout it. And again, obviously, she's still deeply in love with somebody that was taken away from her through no choice of her own. And although, like I said, she's gotten on with her life, there's still some regret that's in any of it. Now, given that and the reason for that, not trying to get overly sort of sentimental or mushy, was that we needed to set up a basis of a group of people that actually had a normal life that a lot of us could relate to. And then sort of amp it up with some of the sort of more intense scenes that were going to be coming out, as well as some of the fantasy elements. That this soft, dear woman called Wanda was going to slowly get pulled into this spider's web that was being played out here between Spawn and all his forces and the CIA and the mafia. And her husband was going to be thought of as a traitor, because how can information be getting out from the CIA at this point? And of course the answer is it has to be a spy. Well, no, it was that Spawn, who used to work for the CIA, had some of that information, but nobody would make the leap in logic of, oh, I wonder if a dead guy's giving that information around. So they ended up looking at people who would be easy targets, and Spawn's best friend, who worked at the CIA, which is where he met him, Terry is one of the ones that becomes sort of, again, caught in the crossfire of some of the circumstances that are going to play out in these 3 seasons here, as well as his wife, who is married to him. Spawn, again, is now face-to-face with the guy that, and again, we do flashbacks of going, he's seen that move. Now, the character here of Chapel is a little surprised, going, wow, how did that guy move so quick? And the answer is because Spawn has fought this guy before and understands the move, so he was able to get away from it. And we're going to now get into a confrontation here where he's saying, I know who you are. And Chapel's going to go, well, who are you? And when he sort of says, it's me, nobody's going to believe it. Because again, Chapel, being that cocky bad guy, somehow believes that he's somewhat invincible and that nobody can actually bring any harm to him. And so Spawn, in a roundabout way, becomes now sort of this savior, if you will, this sentinel being that's going to stop everybody from coming into the alleys and beating up on the homeless, the weak, the meek, and be a defender for them. And it is actually the element that he figures out, that I've lost my wife, I've lost the world, I've lost my humanity, I don't want to do anything, I've got nothing. And he slowly figures out that what he does have is that he has the power at times, done right, to stand up for those that don't have the power, that are constantly picked on. So if you sort of see the bums as sort of the geeks at your school being picked on by, the stronger guys or the jocks, if you will, that Spawn is one of the jocks who's now converted over to the side of the geeks, going, pick on somebody your own size.
Yeah.
I've got to tell you, a lot of the themes and the stuff that comes out of these stories is just a byproduct of my own personal life. I've got a wife that I met when she was 13. She was in junior high. I was in high school. And her name is Wanda, not by coincidence the same name as Spawn's wife. And I would trade any and everything that I have at any time to be able to come back to my wife. I also, during high school, got along with everybody. But I was dismayed at times when the athletes or the bullies would pick on a guy who was 50 pounds less than them. And I would literally get into fights from time to time with guys who were my buddies just because I didn't think it was fair for them to pick on a weakling. And so we sort of have a little bit of that here with Spawn going, leave him alone, pick on somebody your own size. Oh, and by the way, I'm actually bigger than what you might think because of the powers that I have. And you send the message back to wherever you came from that no matter how big they send, no matter how many they send, I will not allow any of you to touch these good people, even though you may think of them as losers and lost souls and people we don't give a crap about because they're just the homeless through circumstances, some of their own, some not of their own. They are here, and to kick them while they are down is just not acceptable to Spawn. And like I said, it's some of the same feelings that I have about people who have a tendency to want to hit their wives and hit kids and are pedophiles and stuff, that it's too easy to pick on the weak of the world. And I'd love for us magically someday to just go back to the old days, the Braveheart days, where if you've got something to say, you take a guy that's your own size and you take a broadsword in your arm and you stand 2 feet from him and you stare him in the eye and you can't chicken shit out, which you can these days with a gun. So you can stand 200 yards away from a guy that you dislike and shoot him in the back, and it's still, to me, very chicken-hearted. And Spawn is sort of more about that mano-a-mano, getting sort of face-to-face with guys, going, if you got something to say it to my face, and we're going to actually get down to it. One of the things that ended up happening, too, later on was the character the child character in the show that was Wanda's new child. We originally had adults come in and they do the voice acting. And I was never really convinced with it. I've never heard any sort of adult do a kid's voice and think that it's convincing. Yes, you can do it if you want to be Bart Simpson, because that's sort of fun and you're intentionally sort of distorting reality. But if you're trying to do reality, I go, if we want people to act like actors, let's go get actors. If we want a child, then let's go and get a child. So eventually, I believe in season 3, I ended up bringing my own daughter in, who was 4 years old at that time. Didn't understand what she was doing, but I would say she was a very good parrot, and I would talk to her, give her the line, she would repeat it into the mic, and we would then have the voice of a 4-year-old instead of I thought, a mediocre adult voice doing a kid's line that was in there.
That's a deep project.
The beginning of this second season, as I said, is taking some of the concepts that we had laid the groundwork for in season 1 and bringing them forward. This is where, as I said, Jason Wynn is looking at this information going, who has this information? And when he looks at it, he goes, there's only a couple people that can get their hands on it. Terry's one of them. So the mere existence of Spawn now puts Terry in jeopardy because by default, Terry becomes one of the few guys that would have the same information. So Terry starts to slowly get caught into this web of sort of deceit and power that Jason Wynn is trying to control. And because of that, Spawn now, who goes, I've got to stay out of the way of my wife, is going to, again, slowly be forced to actually get closer and closer to his wife and actually sort of solve some of the problems. Again, a shot there of Spawn in the shadows, as I'd mentioned, wanting to keep Spawn less anatomically correct with arms and legs and torsos. It just wanted him to be a shape. You saw him in the crack of the buildings there. Chains come snapping out. Cape comes snapping out. You see eyes there. Again, starts to, suffocate people. And to this day, I want it. In the next movie that I make is going to be that Spawn is just a boogeyman, and that you don't quite know if it's real. Is it a ghost? Is it fog? Is it a human? What is it? And if you can sort of leave that question mark in everybody's mind, then I think that's when this character actually is at its creepiest best. Because otherwise, if it's just a guy in a Superman suit, then you go, it's X-Men and it's Spider-Man and it's Fantastic Four and Batman. And we've seen it before, and we're not necessarily sort of anxious when any of those guys walk into a room in the way that I would want you to be anxious if you had sort of, if somebody was to tell you that there was a rapist and they showed you a picture of a rapist and they walked into the room and you knew that information, it would freak you out when they walked in there. Well, I wanted Spawn not to be a rapist by any stretch, but to be that guy that they go, there's a ghost out there. And then when the ghost walked into the room, that the big bad guys, the government, heaven, hell, any force that came against them would actually be on guard to say that there's now another force that's out there. I am neither hell, I am neither heaven. I will not go to either side because I do not believe in either one of them. Al Simmons sort of says that in some of his dialogue. He wasn't a religious man by any stretch. And because of that, he doesn't want to be controlled by God any more than he wants to be controlled by Satan, because he disavows both of them, because he doesn't believe any of it. Now, it becomes hard, as everybody keeps telling him, to say that you don't believe it when it's right in front of your face and you have to deal with the realities of it, which he slowly begins to understand as we get into the third season. But for now, what he's doing is exactly what Hal wants him to do, which is to get very, very emotional. As I said in some of the commentary in the opening of season 1, that the goal of Hal is to get this warrior called Spawn to basically be as dark and cold and calculating and emotionless in terms of his execution of doing things that are dark as possible. So there, where he takes this guy and he makes his mask come down and he puts the guy's fingers in his own eye sockets to prove that he doesn't even have any eyes, because those green slits in his eyes, from my perspective, is the equivalent of a pumpkin. Think about a pumpkin. You cut out the eyes and you put a candle and light comes out from it. That's why his eyes glow. There is nothing behind there other than the glow of the green. And so Spawn is now sitting here going, fine, you want to take me on? I'm going to do all this crazy stuff. And it just keeps amping up all the things that he's trying to walk away from. So now Hal goes, good. He's getting crazy, he's getting insane, he's starting to hide himself into a corner. When people come and he doesn't like it, he kills them. All of that is good for us because he will then someday become the perfect soldier called this Spawn. And we need, in the army of Hal, we need great, great leaders. And Spawn is not meant to be one of the foot soldiers of the big war of Armageddon. He is meant to be one of the great leaders, but he needs to be taught how to be that great leader, and that's what this process is. So every time he does something that may make him feel good, as you can see here, the clown mocking him with his sarcastic laughter going, perfect, you just played right into my hands. I want you to do all this stuff. So what do we care, as Hal, that you may kill Chapel? Even though we could have used him on our side, and we'll eventually get his soul anyways. So you go ahead and do what you got to do, because this is all part of your training here, and this is all good for us. And Spawn, like I said, eventually has to have lots of confrontations, both with this reality and with the character Cagliostro, for him to finally understand the concept of what it is that the character is going to be.
No.
As we also went into the editing bay, sometimes if you didn't get your shadows quite the way that you want it, we would have to go in there and sort of add shadows. But one of the things that I was always sort of pushing was to have what I call foreground, middle ground, background. You see it in this shot here when he's walking, that there are objects in front of him as he was walking by that sort of blot him out for a second. All of that just makes for me sort of believable art, because if you move everything out of the way when you're doing your directing and you just make it clean, it looks too much like a comedy show. And that's what they do in a comedy show. They get all the furniture out of the way. When there's 4 people sitting at the dinner table, they're always facing the camera, and you don't get to sort of move around and put the camera in different places. The way that you create an environment, to me, is very simple. It's called foreground, middle ground, background. So if you're going to put somebody in the middle of the shot, then make sure there's from time to time stuff in the foreground and then stuff in the background. So it just seems like that you're having to go through layers of the world, because when we look outside our own window, that's exactly what the world looks like. So for me, I was always trying to push as much as we could. And again, I think you'll see as each episode sort of progresses, you see more and more of it. And as we got to season 3, we started getting it down to a little bit of a fine sort of art of going, yeah, we know where to put it and where we don't need to put it. But you combine that then also with a color palette that you just saw, a great moody sort of soundtrack. Even the sound and the music here at the end of this episode sort of leaves you with this haunting feeling. I didn't want to do anything uplifting that would get you sort of in a good spirit at the end of it. I wanted you to sort of sit there for a minute or two before you actually turned on the light and went, oof, that was a little emotionally draining. And if I sort of got to that point, then I knew that sort of the theme of what we were trying to bring across in each one of these weekly shows was actually doing the job that we had all set out for. And the director during those 2 years, Eric Radomski, who was in sync with me, ended up winning an Emmy Award for his body of work on it, as well as some of his other work. So I thought we actually accomplished it quite well, given the limitations that we had at that point.